Everyone, and welcome to the Life Burst Podcast. We're doing the deck lists of the most recent set that's coming out, which is going to be Welcome Back Diva. And to start with, I would like to talk about probably my favorite deck going into this next set. I'm not saying it's the best deck here, but I think it's actually maybe the first time a green deck is really positioned to do really well. And this is going to be my pet deck running through this entire season, I think. It's no secret how much I love Bang as a character and as just I like Green Lancer in general. So I tried to figure out the best ways to make this work. In fact, I even went so far as to play quite a bit of Bang version 1.0. Bang Read to Fight. Prior to making this deck list and refining sort of the green idea of how it works in the current meta prior to making this deck list. So I actually have a pretty good feeling that this deck list will perform pretty well, even when I've not done an extreme amount of testing, because I've tested this concept in just basically a different form. Bang Making a Miracle is better than Bang Read to Fight. Not in a vacuum, by the way, but in a general sense here. And we'll compare the two cards in a second. But what's first important is a shout out, by the way, to Cockatrice. This is the Wixoss Cockatrice plugin that is supported by the Wixoss community. This allows me to talk about these cards that are coming out prior to them being printed, and Wixoss is always pretty late in actually putting out the English versions of the cards to be seen on their database. So this is the best way to test upcoming decks, as well as to build them, sort of theory craft them. And I just like this look better because it's just like it's a much more easily seen look on here. Serious shout out to Tetris for running this. Tetris gave me some pointers as well on my last video saying how I can make this look better for you guys. So this is how I'm doing it under Tetris's advice. Anyways, let's get back to it. Bang is positioned to do pretty well in the meta, and the reason why is because it can give Lancer. Now, Lancer is a really, really strong ability in Wixoss, but it's underutilized because green is not necessarily the greatest color in Wixoss. It just doesn't have... the centers are pretty good, but the core itself is just lacking sort of a critical mass of cards, but that starts getting fixed in this set. So it's worth mentioning that, hey, maybe this is the chance for it to really do something good. Bang Making a Miracle is a level 3 center L-Rig green. It's got the same cost as always. But it has auto. At the beginning of your attack phase, you may put one card from under this L-Rig into the trash. If you do, you can enter charge 1. Its enter ability is Signy on your center lane, get Lancer this turn. The cool thing about that, by the way, is that if, for example, somehow the opponent were to get rid of your center lane and you manage to get a different card in that center lane, there's some cards that can like replace themselves with another card and attack with that card. It would also gain Lancer because this sort of gives the ability to that center lane, which is pretty cool. It has a once-a-game action ability where you can spend green, target green Signy on your field, gains S-Lancer till end of turn. S-Lancer is different than normal Lancer. S-Lancer is, if it attacks and advantages a Signy on your opponent's field by battle, you can crush one of your opponent's life cloth. If there's no cards in your opponent's life cloth, you can damage the opponent instead. So this is actually death if it manages to do it. Arguably, I think all Lancers should be this, but that's not how the game rules work. S-Lancer is the only way that you can actually kill someone on the field. A lot of times with these green decks, you manage to get like them down to 0 life, but due to Lancer rules, you're not actually able to kill them and close the game out. Bang allows you to do this. Now, old Bang is pretty good. Unlimited Lancer is very strong. Unlimited Enter Charge is pretty strong too. But for what it's worth, the ability to take one card and put it from under your L-Rig into the L-Rig trash, allowing you to basically go turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 with the able to Enter Charge. Most Wixoss games will end at a max of turn 6. So this is basically giving you Enter Charge the entire game. from turn 3 onwards. If you need to skip a turn because it just doesn't help you, or you're trying to not mill yourself out, like these are ways that you could do that as well, being that it's optional. There's also some cool things that like to see things from your Elrig deck move out of the way, and if you do that, you can do certain stuff. So it's kind of cool there that you can do that as sort of like a byproduct of it. It's not exactly Exceed, but it's similar. Um, the enter effect giving your center Signy Zone Lancer means that, unlike Bang Read to Fight, you're not limited to level 3 green cards, which is just a small pool, right? Aside from how many good level 3 green cards, which, spoilers, there's really only like 2 good ones in Wecross, this allows you to put it on anything, which opens you up to a wide variety of options that are much, much better than just level 3 green cards. The Once a Game, however, does want it to be a green card, but the cool thing is it does not ask you to do a level 3 green card again. It can be any green card, which is huge, because this deck most green decks want to usually play Akufukus as like a 4 of, and then you probably are playing Parajulius as a 2 of, and you have green hat usually comes with a lot of team pump as well, so you've just got incidental ways to make your smaller green cards pretty good in terms of battle efficiency, and because of that, giving anything Lancer is pretty solid, or giving anything that's green is pretty solid. But giving anything Lancer is pretty solid too, and that's actually what we base the deck around. So if you are looking for a deck that is going to deal, this says it gives something Lancer and it gives something else Lancer, so that equates to basically 2 damage. If you're looking for something that gives 2 damage, you're probably better off looking at X, or you're probably better off at looking at Deus. Deus' souls basically give 2 damage by opening up a lane. X gives 2 damage by giving 2 things Assassin. So if you're trying to build with just being green and cool, now I can open up 2 lanes, you really are better off just playing literally any other deck that has that functionality. If you want to make Bang work, and work in a better way that's allowing you to crack the meta a little bit more, you need to think about what she gives that other decks don't give, which is twofold. She gives a little bit of an enter charge, which arguably all green like Elrigs generally do, so that's nothing really new. It turns on Osagetsune, but you're in green, so that's just nothing new anyways. And Osagetsune is a good card for what it's worth. But the other thing that it does is it gives Lancer. Now, we really needed, when I was building this deck, I actually went through the entire card catalog of Wecross, which is around almost 1,000 cards big now. And I started putting down anything that I thought was good with Lancer. And what I thought would be good with Lancer is basically twofold. Does it vanish? Does it have something where it vanishes at a Signy and grants an effect due to vanish? And if that was the case, then I would give it a modifier, a bonus. Or if it's difficult for the opponent to get rid of, then I would give it an advantage. Because giving Lancer to something that the opponent can't really get rid of, or is sticky, gives you an edge, because Lancer at that point becomes the best removal that you could be doing. It gets rid of a Signy, it does damage, but it enter deprives them or enter delays them a turn, so maybe they can't use that enter on their turn to do assist Elrig stuff. So I did modifiers based on that to try to find what is the best things we can give Lancer to. And I came out with a pretty big list. Not all of the things are being seen here. For example, like Chandelier was on the list, and Chandelier is pretty cool because it would enter deprive them. It would also Lancer through and enter, and Chandelier is also a 13k powered Signy. But what I found was black and green offered the best Lancer support, and we'll get into that when we talk about the main deck. But that's the reason why I went so hard into trying to make a Bang deck that arguably hasn't really seen play. Not even in Japan. It sees play a little bit in sort of Japan. But I think this has something to offer that might actually turn our American meta upside down if it's used in a correct way. Bang wants to go to the late game. So let's talk about the actual Elrig deck now. Bang wants to go to the late game. Bang wants to play at least go to turn probably 5. It is what I was aiming for damage output. Something cool that I also did, and it's the first time I'm doing this with these deck lists that we're making for Welcome Back Diva, is I made not only damage calculator according to Strike Theory, and if you guys haven't seen Strike Theory, you probably should watch that video. According to Strike Theory, to make sure we can close out a game, I also charted out where the damage was supposed to be. So this deck doesn't really get very much turn 1 damage. It gets mostly turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 damage. And that's where it's going to shine, right? It's not an aggro deck, because green can't really output early damage. It needs to output late damage, just because of the way the cards are designed, right? Like your Parajulius isn't really going to get early damage done. It's going to get turn 2 damage done, probably. So because we know that we're going to be needing to go to at least turn 5, this is where our Madoka Clap comes in. So we know we need to run Madoka Clap because this will buy us a turn, right? This will make us not die on turn 3, will at least die on turn 4 with a Madoka Clap. So to back it up, we also are going to need something to just extend our life just a little bit longer, and that's where Machina Smash comes in. It's been very proven that the Machina Clap and Machina Smash combo will at least always get you to turn 5. And again, that's the damage output. So when we're looking at ourselves, if we're on the play, or we're the way that I built this deck, if we're on the play or we are on the draw, by turn 5, we will still have enough damage output that we can close the game. So our goal is that we're a turn 5 deck. We're not trying to go over it. We can go over it, but we're not like arguably trying to really go over that. To back us up, we've got Madoka Float. I thought maybe we might want to try something else out here, like the Madoka that bottom decks, because like, hey, wouldn't that be cool? We can add to our early damage output, and that would mean that we could win on turn 4 instead of turn 5. But the more and more I did the math, the more and more I realized we need card draw. So one of the most weak parts of green is it just doesn't have a critical mass of good cards, and because of that, you have good cards, but they're spread out through the deck. You gotta play a bunch of other cards to find those good cards. So having something in the Elrig deck that allow you to find the green card you need on the turn you need is pretty important. So you need some consistency built into the deck, and Madoka Float does that. The other consistency piece that does that as well is Machina Wing Slash. Machina Wing Slash bringing back a Haket, Sui, or a Parajulius is sort of what the doctor ordered for this deck. You really need to just find ways to recycle your early sort of like filter to make this deck hum. What I found when I was playing Bang Read to Fight in preparation for making this deck was that even just 4 Hakats was not enough for me to get to where I needed to be in the game. I had to have more than that. Once I added 2 Haniels into that deck, and again, we're not playing white here, but once I added Haniels into that deck, it started being better. So I figured I need at least 6 filters. I had to run 8 in the white version of the deck that I was playing prior to this, because I was playing on team. But with Madoka Float and Madoka Wing Slash, your early turns are going to be really just set yourself up, right? So you can play Hakat, follow it up with a Sui, or if you want to play the Sui first and then Hakat, you could do that. But really your ideal turn 1s are going to be these blue cards, or at least one of these blue cards to set yourself up for the long run. Your turn 2 is probably going to be a second one, followed by when you start playing your green cards after that. So that's the Elrig deck, but let's talk about our pieces as well. So we've got Xenocluster. This is less for the Enter. We're never really going to be super worried about the Enter in this deck. We have Enter sinks for this deck, so we are going to be using the extra Enter that we accrue through Bang, but we aren't needing a ton of Enter, right? We're not playing, if we needed a ton to Enter, we wouldn't be playing Xenocluster, we'd be playing GGG in order to turn on Parajulius. Instead, this has got 2 roles. The first one is that it helps you draw extra cards because we are a little bit weak to the discard matchup. Not a ton of bit weak because we're going to be doing a lot of deck filtering, so it won't super matter. And our other piece will also help us beat the decks that are trying to discard us out of the game. And oh, by the way, Osagetsun is amazing against those decks. And Lancer is good against those decks anyway. So our late game is actually pretty good, but we got to make sure that our mid game isn't and early game is not completely stripped from us, so that way we stumble in our early game, especially when we need things like Hakats and Suis to set ourselves up for our later game turns. Luckily, with Float as well as Machina Wing Slash and Machina Smash, we have enough redundancy in the deck that we won't completely fall if someone discards us hard. But there are some tempo decks that can basically discard you out turn 2, and you're just out of cards. So this is where Xenocluster really kicks in for that type of thing. The second thing that it actually does, and it's worth mentioning, it's got attack phase timing, which means against the decks that you're not really worried about being enter burned out, or you're not really worried about being about being discarded out, like against, for example, the white decks, you can actually use this on the beginning of your attack phase to enter charge yourself, which will turn on Parajulius very early in the game. So if you need to have a little bit of an extra clock, that is actually something that is a real choice to do. You don't always use it, but sometimes you do use it. The last one's going to be one of the new cards here called Miasma Labyrinth. Now, Miasma Labyrinth it's a new card. I'll read it out. Its use timing is main phase. Its use conditions that you need to have a dream team with 3 or more colors. That's one of the main reasons why we're running blue as our side stuff rather than just running an extra black or an extra green, which I considered both of those things. Extra black might give us Death Deck, for example. Extra green might give us the double Lancer piece. This card is very, very strong on its own and can basically win late games, which is one of the reasons why you play it. Also, the deck needs a little bit extra damage output, and this allows you to have that. Not only does it do the negative 12,000, but each player reveals and puts the top 7 cards of their deck into their trash, can help you win late games. Now, it's not like Death Deck, where you're very likely to mill the opponent out with Death Deck, or even better, with the diagram piece where you mill them, I think it's 15. You're going to, in that case, you basically guarantee to mill them out. But one of our game plans really does revolve around Phalaris, playing Phalaris on turn 3 or 4 to get a lot of extra damage in. So because we have a mill as built into some of our game plan, this allows us to sort of end that mill, expedite that mill. It often, you'll pay Phalaris, sometimes they'll look at it, see that they have 17 cards left in their deck, and say, that's fine, Phalaris can do its thing, I'll win before then. And that's when you then whip this out afterwards, and they go, okay, maybe I'm screwed. But it gives you some reach as well. You get to not only, generally speaking, your modes for this, you've got 4, is going to be that you can choose 1 for each level of your center Elrig, so you'll play this on turn 3 or 4, most likely turn 4. You'll target one of your opponent's, Signy on your opponent's field. It gets negative 12,000 till end of turn. Target one of the Signy in your trash and return to your hand. Target one of the Signy in your trash and return it to the field. Or each player puts the top 7 cards of their deck into their trash. There's a lot of versatility that can be played here. The most important part, I think, of this card that people are just not going to read very easily is it says return target Signy from your trash to your hand. It does not say without a guard. So generally speaking, the 3 modes that you're going to hit with this are mill your opponent, bring a guard back to your hand, do removal. Right? And if you, for some reason, don't want to do the negative 12,000, you could probably bring back an Osagetsun or a Phalaris, and that's going to basically help you do a damage anyways. There are going to be some rare cases against, like, a white decks, for example, that you might choose to go target Signy on your opponent's field, gets negative 12,000, return a guard from my trash onto the field, return a guard from my hand, or trash into my hand, and then you'll have a guard for that, and then when they white heaven, they'll have to bounce the guard. You could probably trash the guard, now that I'm saying it out loud. But yeah, I'm saying it just makes things awkward for your opponent. You can grab a guard, weirdly enough, out of your trash and put it on the field if there's any reason for you to do so. But But it's a very, very flexible piece that allows you to pretty much always win the late game when you play this, because there's just so many ways that you can kill your opponent with this or extend your own game to be longer. This is also part of the core package that allows you to get to that late game. One of the things that I wanted to do with my Signies in the front end is I wanted to play 4 Hakats, and I wanted to play some amount of Hayuis. I thought that I wanted to maybe play 3 of these and maybe not play the Ipitem, because I'm a crazy person and I'm okay with being at 19 life bursts, because I really do value filtering in these decks so much. Now, Hakat needs no whatever the word is, introduction. But this one is a new card where it has an enter ability. You can discard up to 2 cards from your hand and draw 1 card for each card that you discarded this way. This enables a lot of things that isn't necessarily real in this deck. Yeah, we're running a Tama, which has a it wants to see 10. It wants to see 10 things in the trash in order for its ability to function. So you do want a little bit of trash in trash like accumulation in your deck, so it pays off there. But the real thing is that it lets you dig, and you need that in green. Even if it's a blind dig, you kind of need it in green. Otherwise, you're not going to get your pieces, you're not going to get your green pieces that you need to function on the turns that you need to function them on, and you're also going to end up with no guards, right? That's one of the things that's going to make us lose pretty early, is we are a little bit of a later game deck, so we need to have guards early on to protect our life cloth. Guards don't matter, very late in the game. Like if we have 3 guards in hand and it's turns 5, we're dead anyways in the water. So it just lets us help get ourselves to that. Now, we have a fair amount of trash recursion, so this doesn't mean like if we discard something from our hand, it's gone forever, we can bring it back. But we also have a few silver bullets in here that, like, if it's not the relevant matchup, we can get rid of and trash it, so that way we can cash it in for something better. That's our early game level 1s. Again, we've got Servants. We have 1 Ipitam. That's just for the life burst. I think there's a better card coming out in set 7, next set coming up, that I would replace this with in an instant. I just needed something, and I needed a little bit more black in the deck, so Ipitam gets the nod there. Moving on to our level 2s, we don't have a ton of them, but we got a few. The first one is going to be the Akufuku. Now, Akufuku is just a staple, I think, in all green decks, and that's partially because Akufuku is really powerful, and partially because there's not a lot of other level 2 greens to play. This life burst is pretty fantastic in the current meta. You don't take damage for your opponent's level 3 or less Signy. That means that if they trigger a victory and hit this, that's terrible for them. That's awful, right? So that's pretty good against the X and red decks. Against the blue decks, it allows you to do non-targeted like stopping damage. The enter charge is pretty good here because we do have some enter sinks, but it's just like it's just very good in the current meta, I think. I would be a little wary of white decks with this, because Tama's starting to get played, and so they could be like, all right, I guess I won't attack here, and then I'll just use my Tama ability, and that means you're going to still save yourself 1 damage from that, so it's not like this is a loss. This is still an okay life burst, but it's something that is a little less powerful moving into the next meta if Tama ends up being very, very good. I think Tama gets countered by a bunch of stuff, though, so I still think this is pretty okay. And then we have Churin as a level 2. I usually only want to play 2 Churin and would rather play, again, like something else, like a third version of this. But Churin is just more enter charge. What I really found out was on the draw. So if you're playing first, on your second turn when you attack, you don't always have enough damage output on turn 2. Turn 3 on, you're going to be fine. So what I felt was that there's pretty much an easy way to get Parajulius, right? By turn 2, you will have drawn a bunch of cards from Madoka Float, you'll wing slashed away something, and you could potentially bring back Parajulius, and you've got ways to dig in to basically ensure that you have Parajulius on turn 2. Or a black pack, right? That's the other way that I found to shore up my turn 2, I need more removal to deal damage. And what I found was I just needed a little bit of something that could enable Enercharge. Of course, you could always Xenocluster, but that's not always the greatest move. So I just needed the third Churin to do that. It started working out after that between the 3 Churins and the 2 black packs. You always have basically one of these on your turn 2, so you'll always be pretty good to do a turn 2 removal. While we're here, I guess we should talk about the black pack since it's there. Black pack is just, it's 2 enter, which I don't love for removal, but it's got the best life burst that you can get in a black removal spell currently. There will be another card that comes out at some point that I'll swap this to, where it's just 1 black and does negative 7,000. But the difference between negative 6,000 and negative 7,000 in Wixoss right now is huge. Things get to 7,000 power. Nothing gets to 6,000 power. You're really just like, there's no difference between negative 5,000 and negative 6,000. But negative 10,000 will take care of most things, even in the late game, which is one of the reasons why I liked this. The other one that I was thinking about over this was Digger, because Digger's good in the early game, and Digger is good in the late game, and this also does that. It's good in the early game, good in the late game. Plus, the 10,000 power is not irrelevant in a deck that wants to maybe give a level 1 Parajulius Lancer, give it 10,000. It's attacking at now at 12,000. That's pretty huge. It can pretty much kill anything. But the life burst is good. Vanish target level 1 on your opponent's field, or Enter Charge 2. The Enter Charge 2 is a lot of Enter, and if you don't need to do the Vanish effect, which this deck isn't, I should clarify, this deck is not reliant on its life bursts to open lanes. I made sure to build it so that way, between the main deck and the Elrig deck, there's enough removal consistently that you won't have to use your life bursts as removal if you don't want to. You can. It still would be good. If someone hit me with this on turn 1, and this could alleviate that turn 2 problem where I open lane, great. I'll do it. If I'm looking at basically opening 1,000 lanes already, because it's like turn 3 and I have a million ways to do it, I'm less likely to. I might Enter Charge 2 instead. But the Vanish target level 1's usually good until turn 3, because the opponent will usually try to max out their lane power. So a 3-3-1 lane is probably more powerful than a 3-2-2 lane, for example. And so I found that, generally speaking, in games of Wixoss, people will probably put out either a turn 1 of 1-1, a turn 2 of 2-1-1, and then on turn 3 put out a 3-3-1 split. So I think this will get you at least until turn 3 in terms of life burst, and that's really where you need to be on the most defensive. After that, I don't know, it's less good, but I think it's pretty okay here for now anyways. The last level 2 that we need to talk about is a new card, Aya. Memoria second play. It's got the ability to action you down this Signy, and you can target one Signy in your enter zone and put that into the field. So here's why I like this. We need consistency, and it's green. That's really it. It's not very hard to figure out at all, but we needed consistency, and it's green, so it does all these things. For what it's worth, this is basically a spell in the deck as well. And this deck plays quote-unquote 6 spells between this card, the Black Pack, and the Animirage. This just gets you... it'll get you the Parajulius, it'll get you the Phalaris that you need. Maybe it'll get you the Cot, so that way you can dig for something specific. But more importantly, it will help you get the things your opponents really don't want you giving S-Lancer to. And will go out of their way to kill, so that way you don't have that turn 5, you are out of Elrigs, and I have S-Lancer, so good luck. And that's how you're going to generally speaking win these games. With these consistency. I gotta say, between the Hakats, the Suis, and the Ayas, the deck is and also the Machina Wing Slash and Machina Smash. The deck is really consistent at getting the cards that you want when you want. Now, there's not a huge toolbox in this deck, but there's enough that they're going to be like annoying the crap out of your opponents. Your opponents, generally speaking, will commit vanish effects to or attacking to Signy that they deem problematic and don't want to see, and this brings those back without having them to have to go to the trash. So it gets a direct route to bringing these things back out. One of the reasons why we play it. I wouldn't play more of a 2 of, though. It's situational enough that it's only a 2 of. Moving right along into our 3 drops. The first one to talk about is Phalaris. So like I said, we needed more damage output. We are a late game deck, but that doesn't mean that we are a defensive deck. We are not a defensive deck. We are aggressive. We are aggressive more in the late game than we are in the early game, but we don't have the blue power of like freezing or the white power of like just gumming up the field with a really defensive Signy. And like green doesn't have defensive Signy yet, so it's not an option that we can do. So we just needed more damage output. Now Phalaris is weird damage output. It's easy to make it so that way this will mill your cause, even if it's delayed, it'll cause your opponent to mill themselves out. A refresh will give you damage. Phalaris is cool in this deck because we have multiple ways to bring it back, so if we need to do multiple Phalarises, we can do it. And again, we have enough dig that one Phalaris will get there. We will find this pretty consistently. And Phalaris with Lancer, when your opponent can't deal with it, is just utterly disgusting. So, to be clear here, like, if the opponent were to do something like Bang de Capo and you play a Phalaris in the center lane and you give it Lancer, you're gonna annihilate that opponent. Because this does not matter if the opponent prevents damage. A refresh and a Lancer technically aren't damage dealt. So you can deal a lot of damage through this method. One of the reasons why I like it, like I said, we're trying to have our Lancer, which is going to be basically 3 drops and up because we're going to be doing it on turn 3, be very impactful. We have Osagetsune. Osagetsune is always going to be a staple pretty much in all green decks. It says if, this attacks and one card was moved from your deck to your Elrig zone, or to your Enter zone, which is basically Enter charge. You can pay 2. If you do Vanish target Signy on your opponent's field 12,000 or more, up to 2 target Signy gain 5,000 power till end of turn. You can do this to power up your Signy to be stronger than black. That matters in a meta that has so much Machina Smashes going around that you can power over Machina Smash and still get your Lancer through. Or probably an open lane. And you also can target your opponent's Signy. So plus 5,000 will turn most things into over 12,000, and then you can vanish it on attacking. One of the cool things is you can actually put this in a lane, give it Lancer with either of the bang abilities, and then when you attack, you can open up a different lane and still Lancer through in order to get yourself damage, so it's versatile in that way as well. Overall, solid card. But let's talk about some more of these 3 drops that are more like silver bullety that we put into the deck. Amino Acid's the first one. Now, Amino Acid is got the really, really rare achievement of basically being like, I don't care if your opponent's playing Machina, it won't ever stop me. It also is one of the only Signy that can go up against Deus's Souls and like just live to tell the tale. This pumps all of your other Signy, which, again, between this and an Osagetsune, you can give something 10,000 power, and your Hakat at that point is just going to be ginormous. A 13k is going to win anything in combat, and also be that specific number that you need to defeat H2Os. So this helps out with that. And while we're on the topic, H2Os and Exias, like these are terrible against this deck. And these are some of the most powerful cards in Wixoss. So one of the things that you're getting is green is actually really, really well positioned to beat up a lot of the meta-relevant decks in Wecross. It's just no one really wants to play green because the thought of it having quote-unquote bad cards, but it really doesn't have bad cards. It has inconsistent critical mass of cards. Once we fix that, like we did with all the blue, you have cards like Amino Acid, which are actually really amazing. Being that the opponent like can, and sometimes we'll make the mistake of putting out a Machina Binds and target it, and you go, cool, I will attack for a 32,000 Signy, because it just grows under a Machina Bind. So, you're going to put yourselves in scenarios like that, where you can put this, give S Lancer to this, and watch your opponents just, like, not be able to comprehend. They are dying this turn, no matter what they do, even if they thought they were safe. The other one is Anna Mirage. Again, this acts more like a spell to me, but it is worth mentioning this is a level 3 Signy with 13k power. Again, that number is relevant, allows you to attack through open lanes and not be Machina smashed away, and it's more removal. Removal is pretty good in a deck that is looking to have open lanes. The Lancer can only deal with one lane. It needs to open up 2 other lanes in the late game. This is one of the ways you do it. But then we've got Tama. So we've got the Black Tama here, and it's got a very cool ability, which is constant. If there are 13 more cards in your trash, this gains 13,000 power, and Shadow level 2 or lower on level 2 or lower Signy. So, let's talk about that. This is the only card so far that I really know that can consistently get Shadow during your turn. Shadow during your turn with Lancer is probably the single greatest thing that you can be doing in the deck. Now, it doesn't have Shadow L rigs, right? So it'll still get targeted by your Sistel rigs and be annoying to deal with on that. But what this has going for it that the other ones don't is, first off, the 13 power kills, again, H2O, things like that. But it also has, there's a lot of life bursts at level 1 and 2 right now. Like, the meta is very dependent on these things like Ipitam. To make the numbers, the critical numbers it needs from the Signy's life bursts. So this is cool in the fact that like you can give this Lancer if the opponent's L rigs aren't going to stop it, right? And they might have a lane filler when they hit Anna Mirage or Haniel, and you'll still be able to go through with it. If the opponent hits one of those vanish effects and it's a level 1 or level 2, then that doesn't matter here, right? Especially because there's actually quite a few like bucklers running around, which is basically just vanish target Signy by paying an enter. That doesn't matter. These are immune to those things. A lot of things say target. This is one of the reasons why Focalore, even though Focalore is pretty good, Focalore targets. So this has Shadow for that. It's not going to be downed for those things. So there's quite a few cards that life burst that this just trumps. It's worth mentioning that it's an out. It will come up not super often, but it'll come up often enough that you should know about it. And then the last level 3 that we're going to have in the deck is Quinn. So there's a trend that we've been going from level 1s that have 2,000 power because they're utility level 1s. We're going to see more of those. Right? This card, for example, is going to be one of the ones that's going to push more of these level 2000s. We've got the Adams deck that has a level 2000s, that's PA, and we've got Bradamante, that's a 2000. So there's a fair amount of 2000s running around. And this will kill those. More importantly, these will rearrange lanes, which means that you can feel free to do things like Machina Smash Away, an annoying thing that maybe your opponent's put in that center lane, because they go like, well, look, now if you have an open lane there, it doesn't matter when your bang grows, because you'll have an open lane, you'll have to give Lancer to that open lane, and who cares about that? This actually helps alleviate that. At that point, you move something into that open lane, and you still have the Lancer, so you can Lancer through it, but now the open lane is in a different place that doesn't have Lancer. That's one of the reasons why Quinn is here. So aside from killing small things, it also helps you utility-wise. The last thing to mention is that negative 2000 doesn't have to kill a Signy, but there's plenty of Signy right now especially coming out in this set, that get to 13,000. Some even get to 15,000. In the case of the 15,000, the negative 2,000 turns that into 13,000. You've got plenty of ways to use your 13,000 Signy to kill out your opponent's Signy or Lancer through it. The negative 2,000 on the 13,000 Signy will put it under that 12k range, so you can basically wipe it out with pretty much anything that you have. And then you'll be able to Lancer. So this is just purely Lancer support in most cases, but it will hit surprising amount of 2000s that your opponents put out. So it is well timed, and also again, you have ways to get it from your trash. You have ways to get it from your Enter. It's also surprisingly pretty good on the defensive. Less good against souls, but it can cause some pretty complicated combat math. But it's actually pretty good against like other things, right? Especially against maybe souls where you put an amino acid in front of it instead. So you can kind of mess with the opponent's stuff with this thing. And then negative 2000 is relevant there too, because then maybe you put it in line with something and shrink something down so they can't get rid of one of your very powerful Signy that you're going to probably smash them with on the next turn. So that is the deck, right? So we went over every single thing in the deck at this point. I'm really excited to play. It's probably going to be my main deck moving forward. Adams was fun for me, but this deck feels like it hits in a certain way that the meta's not really expecting. It actually has quite a few things that exploit the current meta. As well as just Bang's just my favorite Elrig, so I wanna play with it more. But I love this deck mostly because of the consistency that this deck has. It has some issues with hitting all the green because it's a little greedy on its black and its blue, competing for green costs. But the fact that Bang enter charges, the fact that a lot of your life bursts enter charge, and the fact that Tama's other thing that it does is give you consistent black when you play it, so you can then play your black packs, you can definitely play your smashes, you can definitely play your miasma labyrinths consistently. I think it works. I haven't tested the enter, that's my one concern with it. But I think overall it's very extremely consistent. I mean, it has 8 cards in the main deck. That's like almost 1 in 4 chance to consistently mess with your deck to get what you need, as well as 3 cards in the Elrig deck that help you with your consistency. So I think this finds basically any deck card it needs at any point in time and plays it. Especially if you're thinking about your Bangs enter charging 1 as also kind of drawing 1, because if you have an Aya in your hand, it's draw. And if you use that enter and you bring it back with either a miasma or a machina, then it's basically a draw card anyways too. So it ends up being pretty fantastic there. Tell me what you guys think. Are you guys excited about Bang? Is there another one of these returning Elrigs that you think you found a way to make it better than what other people have thought? Tell me any or all thoughts you have on the comments below. I went way too long in this video, but I can't help but love Bang, so tell me what you guys think.